Taoiseach, there are many reasons why people before profit will be supporting the no confidence motion in your government tomorrow. But the most important and powerful of those at the moment is your absolutely heartless and cruel decision to allow the eviction of thousands of families, individuals and, worst of all, children into homelessness with your decision to lift the eviction ban. In the vast majority of those cases, those people have nowhere to go. They don't have emergency accommodation available to them, and certainly not, in most cases, anywhere near where they live, where their children go to school. They have no social and affordable housing available to them because they're usually way too far down the list. They don't have affordable private rented accommodation available to them because rents are at absolutely extortionate levels. They don't have HAP support that goes anywhere near meeting the rent levels. And where the so-called mitigation measures that you have been trying to trumpet as an excuse for lifting the eviction ban are either not in place at all or completely not functioning in any serious effective way, such as the purchase in situ scheme or the mooted cost rental purchase scheme. I have to say, I have to comment, I think it is utterly shameful that some independents, so-called, in this House are horse trading with the government over local issues that have nothing to do with the homeless and housing crisis in exchange for potentially supporting you to put thousands of families and individuals into homelessness. They should be ashamed of themselves. The Green Party, who in their pre-election statement said they were, quote, against evictions into homelessness, who are going to vote and have voted with you to put thousands of people into homelessness. Some in the opposition say that the eviction ban should be kept temporarily. We will of course support those efforts, but People Before Profit's view is that all the approximate 750,000 people who live in private rented accommodation in this country should have security of tenure, and if they do nothing wrong should not be evicted, as is the case in most of Europe. So Taoiseach, this weekend, because you are clearly grimly determined to press ahead with this cruel and heartless measure to allow the eviction of thousands of people, the Cost of Living Coalition is calling for people to gather outside the gates of the Dáil at 1 o'clock to protest and resist against your eviction ban. And we will also be saying to people, anybody who overholds has every right to do so, given that they have nowhere else to go. Aren't they right, Taoiseach? Those who are facing eviction, who have nowhere to go, are they not right at this stage to protest and indeed to overhold? Would you meekly go into homelessness if you were faced with an unfair, no-fault eviction?
Taoiseach.
Deputy, just like you, in my constituency service, I deal with housing queries all the time. Probably a quarter or a third of the queries that come through our constituency office are now related to housing, and every circumstance is different. And we try to give people the best advice, whether it's advice that we give them or advice with the help of the Free Legal Advice Centre, or whether it's advice from Threshold. And certainly anyone who has had a notice to quit served on them, who has nowhere to go, has no other option, I would absolutely advise them to seek the best advice that they can get. And ideally not from politicians, but from groups like Threshold or FLAC or others who can outline to them what their best options are and what the consequences are of the different options. And that's what I would say. Every case is different. Every case should be treated individually and sympathetically, and people should be given the best advice in their interests, not in the political interests of any politician or any party. Deputy, the motion on Wednesday morning is a motion of confidence in the government. It's being tabled by the three party leaders in coalition. As you know, this government has a majority. With the help of independents, we have a majority above what is required, a supermajority, if you will. And I think it is up to independents to decide for themselves whether or not they want to vote confidence in the government or whether they want to abstain, and they shouldn't be browbeaten by you in that regard. But you also should be honest about the effect of a motion of confidence. If the motion of confidence fails tomorrow morning, if the opposition is successful, then the Dáil will be dissolved tomorrow evening. There will be an election sometime in April. The Dáil won't meet again until sometime in May. and the eviction ban will have long lapsed since then. That's a simple fact. So don't try to pretend that by voting no confidence in the government tomorrow morning that you're somehow going to stop the eviction ban from lapsing. In fact, you'll make it impossible for it to lapse.
If this government was dissolved, it would at last open up the possibility that we could take the sort of radical emergency measures that are necessary to address the housing crisis. And finally depart from the failed strategy that successive Fine Gael governments have pursued of favouring the interests of speculators and developers and vulture funds and corporate landlords who are profiteering and benefiting from the housing misery that tens and tens of thousands of people are suffering. So I absolutely not only urge people to vote no confidence in this government, but more importantly, given you probably do have the numbers, for people to do as we did with the water charges, to get out on the street where people power undoes the terrible things that a government is trying to impose on them, because they have no choice. And you see, you didn't answer the question, Taoiseach. What would you, if you were faced with eviction and had nowhere to go and didn't have the money to afford the extortionate rents and weren't high up enough the social housing list, or indeed weren't eligible for social housing and didn't have the money to pay the unaffordable house prices, would you meekly accept that you had to be evicted into homelessness, or would you be justified in overholding and getting out on the streets and protesting against a government that would allow that to happen?
Deputy, I did answer your question. I said that every case is individual and people should seek the best advice they can get from organisations like Threshold, from the Free Legal Advice Centre, from others. And in some cases, Deputy, people do overhold. And in some cases, the landlord will accept that, will say, for example, I understand that you haven't found a place yet, and we'll let you overhold as long as you continue to pay the rent. And that happens all the time. That's not something new. That's been happening for as long as I can remember. And some cases go to the RTB where they're heard, and both sides are heard, and then there's a determination order, and then and only then can I go to court. And the only place in Ireland where an eviction order can actually be handed down in Ireland is in court. That is the system. And anybody who comes to me for advice, I give them the best advice that I can. But Deputy, you're wrong on one thing. If the motion of confidence tomorrow fails, if the opposition is successful, the government isn't dissolved. The Dáil is dissolved. And that means that the eviction ban will lapse anyway. And Deputy, you will have to fight for your seat. We all will. But if the polls are to be believed, most of your seats, probably you'll be the only one to survive. Most of the before-profit seats will be taken by Sinn Féin. You'll probably be the only one to survive. And all Sinn Féin wants to do is, all Sinn Féin, absolutely, I've increased my vote in every election I've run in, Deputy. Always taken the first or second seat, despite what people may say. Deputy, what you'll see is one of two things: the re-election of this government, or a government led by Sinn Féin that's going to end the eviction ban anyway in January. So what's the point in your motion?